Welcome to Secrets of Social Impact Communicators, the podcast where we explore how nonprofit leaders can breathe, lead, and grow. I'm your host, Nate Burt, founder of Silver Maple Strategies. So great to have you with us today. Today's conversation is fascinating. So I have been working with artificial intelligence tools like ChatGPT here at Silver Maple Strategies since we started back in October of 2022. So goodness, that's been about 3 years ago as I'm recording this today. And look, these tools are many ways transformative, right? Very controversial in some ways, right? In terms of impact on communities, impact on the environment. Those are all very real concerns. And what you're going to hear in today's conversation is going to maybe challenge how you've thought about AI, specifically in social impact settings, whether you are in a nonprofit or an association or maybe in education, someone who's doing social impact driven work. My guest today is Aram Fischer, who's CEO of Change Agent AI, an alternative to tools like ChatGPT or Gemini, and specifically designed from the ground up for social impact causes, social impact organizations. So really, really interesting. So I encourage you to stick around and listen to the entire conversation because I think there are going to be some nuggets, things you can experiment, try on your own, maybe things you haven't thought about as far as the tools that we use to advance social impact work. So I also want to make sure before we dive into this conversation today that you have a chance, if you haven't already heard one of our recent teaching podcasts episodes, I want to encourage you to go back and listen. So the episode I'm referencing is titled Economic Uncertainty and Your Nonprofit, 5 Actions You Can Take No Matter What's Happening Around You. So look, we're living in a time of unprecedented change, technology, politically, economically. Again, that's not a political statement. It's just a reflection of what I observe as I sit here working with our nonprofit clients every day. And so this economic uncertainty episode, I'd love some feedback on it, right? So this is something new that we're trying. I'm not just going to be interviewing awesome guests. We'll continue to do that. And we're looking for opportunities to provide some coaching, teaching, practical wisdom that can help you immediately in your organization get some greater morale, clarity, and flexibility. Those are the 3 pillars of resilience as we describe it here at Silver Maple Strategies. So check that episode out. Shoot me an email, nate@silvermaplestrategies.com, or leave a comment, rate and review the show, and give us some thoughts on whether you like those episodes, if we should do more of them in the future, etc. All right, without further ado, let's dive into my interview with Aram Fischer, CEO of Change Agent AI. Well, welcome back to Secrets of Social Impact Communicators. I am Nate Burt, and with me today is a very special guest. Aram Fischer is CEO of Change Agent AI. Aram, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Excited for this interview.
Absolutely. So I want you to start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background and what you do at Change Agent AI.
So I am the CEO and co-founder of Change Agent AI. Naturally, my career started as a documentary filmmaker.
Amazing.
So that's a thing. But yeah, I started as a documentary filmmaker, and I've worked as a marketing lead, as a general manager of a media company. I had a startup for a while that ended up not working out, that was putting basically those screens in clinic settings that you now see more commonly now. I was doing back in 2016. I worked in tech and business development, and then became a political communications consultant, where I met my co-founder, our CTO and president, Craig Johnson. And we actually embarked on a different AI project back in 2023, where we were going to basically help people with sometimes people reply to mass emails. Doesn't happen a ton, but it does happen some. And when that happens, it can be a bear to basically sort through the out of offices and to find the really good stuff. Also to identify the not good stuff and to not subject your people to it or put the spam aside. We ended up pivoting away from that into Change Agent AI after that. And yeah, I know we're going to dive deeper into it, so I won't jump ahead yet.
Awesome. I love the background and love the diversity of experiences, that entrepreneurial bent, which I think will come through loud and clear in this interview today. Aram, when did you first know that you wanted to do purpose-driven work rather than just, work for a paycheck, work for the bottom line, like that deeper meaning? Like, where does that desire come from in you?
Yeah, I mean, it's particularly strong on my mom's side of the family. My dad was this way, but not so much his sort of, his family's a little bit of a black sheep. But on my mom's side, there's been lots of particularly activist women, but also the men as well, always a sense of social responsibility, from everything from volunteering to fighting World War II to working in all kinds of political organizing contexts, charity, and the like. So I was sort of raised in, you have a responsibility to your community, and that's something to act on. And I've always, frankly, had a hard time working in work that isn't purpose-driven because it feels like something's missing.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And thanks for sharing that family context. It's really interesting to me how our roots shape the path that we take in life. And that's a really great call out. Can you talk a little bit about, with Change Agent AI, help our audience understand a little bit more, especially like we have a lot of nonprofit leaders and social impact professionals who listen to this show. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what are the problems you are trying to solve with this, and what is the nature of the technology? Like, give us a little look behind the scenes.
Yeah, so the short version is that we are an alternative to the big AI platforms like Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini that's built specifically for the social sector. So if you're a 501c something, so either like a nonprofit charity, an advocacy organization, or a union, we're built just for you. So we, for example, we want more emotional language because no one donates their time or money unless they feel a 9 or a 10 about your cause or campaign. I've never contributed to something I feel 7 about. You didn't get me there. I'm excited. Right. I wish you well, but sorry, birding in a state I don't live in is not going to do it for me. So that's one piece of it, is that we've got a model that's really tuned for social sector work. We also offer all kinds of templates and tools that are specific to the social sector. So when we think about use cases, we're more likely to think about program, fundraising, nonprofit communications, as opposed to, say, selling retail goods. We're really focused on the social sector exclusively. And so that's where our greatest expertise is and the greatest offerings of a platform. The other thing is our founding partner is a civil rights organization. So there's some very different values than, say, a big tech venture capitalist is going to bring. So we're not solely focused on returning some massive multiple to investors and building shareholder value. We really want to make sure that we're, providing a service to our clients that is values aligned. So to start with, we're truly private and we're completely contained, so your data never goes anywhere else. And our privacy policy is that your data belongs to you, like client data belongs to clients. It's a relatively revolutionary idea for a software company. I was going to say, what a
concept. Right.
Yeah. Like I've never walked into anyone's house and been like, I really like that picture frame. I think that should be mine now. And it feels a little bit like that's how tech companies approach people's data. And I've always been frustrated by that. So our basic take is it belongs to you. And not only do we not sell your data or share your data, we also won't train on your data unless we're doing some kind of special project with your explicit permission or really the encouragement because you want us to build a custom model for you. And if you delete your data, it truly goes away when we run a backup that night. And we even have a temporary chat mode in case, you're using personally identifiable information, for example, and you don't want that to ever hit our servers. You can have this completely browser-based temporary chat. So privacy is a really big differentiator. The next one is we really work on bias. We have the civil rights organization background, right? And we want to eliminate the biases that get perpetuated when you train on the internet. The internet is not representative of everybody. It's more focused on America than the world, for example. It skews towards people with more means. There's a bunch of different ways that when you train on the internet, you get a bias in that language model. All language is bias, right? Like we can't pretend it doesn't, but we want to make sure, for example, that misogyny, racism, and homophobia are things that are mitigated as much as possible, right? Women can be executives. We want a model that accepts that as a principle, if you will. So we work on bias. And then we also have positive bias for things like centering impact, inflaming passions, inspiring action. So whereas corporate language tends to want to deconflict, we actually want the drama. We want you to feel like you can be the hero of the story who's feeding the hungry in your community. We want you to be the person who can engage in climate action and make a difference. So we want to turn that up, whereas corporate language wants to turn it down. And so we have a lean in that direction. We're also staunchly pro-worker in the social sector. If you got to cut people because you're having a budget crunch, that's one thing. But replacing a worker with AI doesn't make a lot of sense because I'm still yet to meet a nonprofit who's in danger of completing their mission. I've never heard anyone say hunger, we got it sewn up. The finish line's right there. We're going to run through the tape in, December of 25. I'm going to have to figure something else to do in 26 because, check. So what we want to do is give these nonprofit workers who are usually extremely specialized on a very specialized issue area in a particular place, the superpowers to be able to do more and have greater impact. So we really want to be that like force multiplier. And then finally, we're much greener. So we believe that we have a responsibility to be as green as possible. And so throughout our supply chain, we make choices that reduce the carbon footprint of what we do, the water usage, et cetera. So the kind of top line number is that 250 users of our platform use the same electricity as a refrigerator on like a week to week or month to month basis.
That's amazing. Yeah, I appreciate, as you were going through that list of like what sets you apart from maybe the more name brand big tech companies, you're checking all the boxes that I so frequently hear from clients as far as from environmental to bias to data privacy and security. So really appreciate your walking us through that. Those are sort of the behind the scenes, the philosophy of what you're doing. When it comes to the actual user experience of Change Agent AI, can you talk a little bit about some of the key features, maybe things that would be familiar to an AI, basic, someone who's used an AI system before, and maybe some tools or functions that would really tend to wow people or maybe set them apart from a typical, ChatGPT or the equivalent?
Yeah. So we have intentionally mimicked, the user experience of other tools. They're mimicking each other as well. And so if you were to log into Change Agent, you'd feel very at home if you're, say, a ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini user. It's a very similar experience. You've got a chat window. You can toggle web search on and off. We have some additional tools where you can, for example, extract a YouTube transcript. So if you care deeply about what happens in school boards and you've got a school board meeting from, Peoria Unified, you can extract the transcript from that school board meeting and interrogate it to see if something happened there that's really meaningful to you. And, maybe it gives you some insights into how you want to organize to advance something you support or prevent something from passing that you oppose. We have our equivalent of custom GPTs or gems in Gemini, which are called mini change agents. That's very similar. We've got our equivalent of projects in ChatGPT, artifacts in Claude, Notebook LM from Gemini. So you can load in different documents that you have. One thing that's different about us is that we've been really focused on sharing from the beginning. Big tech has a tendency to want to atomize us into users, and those users pay them money or have a single account. Whereas a Change Agent, because we're in the nonprofit sector and nonprofits collaborate, we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do we encourage and facilitate that collaboration. So if you're, say, a 5-person nonprofit or a 50-person nonprofit or a 500-person nonprofit, you can load in documents and then share those across your teams. So you might have a group just for communications that have relevant documents for communications. You might have like sort of mission, vision, value, or annual report documents that are more universal. And there's a knowledge base essentially that you can pull from, almost like a Google Drive that's living in the tool so that you can leverage those as context, as we call it. There's also the ability to share these mini change agents. So let's say you and I are fundraisers and we've developed the perfect thank you note generator. We can share the thank you note with each other. And like you could even duplicate my version so that you can create one that's in Nate's voice instead of Aram's voice.
Oh, that's very cool.
So we've got a lot of bells and whistles, that's kind of our standard license, which is basically a Teams license. And at the enterprise level, we're a fully private AI platform that you can do, all the enterprisey things that you might want to do. So fine-tune permissioning for different people. You can build tools in Python to extend the capability of the platform itself. So for example, you could connect to your reporting databases through a tool like BigQuery or dbt. And the reason why that's exciting is because I don't know how to write a SQL query. I assume most of your leaders don't, but they might have a data person on the team who does. And right now the process is, Aram comes up with a question, sends it to a friendly data person. The friendly data person takes 24 to 72 hours to respond. Then I get the response and I inevitably have a follow-up or a set of follow-ups.
Sure.
And then I wait 24 to 72 hours for a friendly data person to respond. It's slow. But now the change agent will translate the plain language question, like how many donors did we have between $5,000 and $10,000 last year, turn that into a SQL query and get that answer straight away. And that accelerates time to insight massively, right? So it's a very exciting feature to be able to integrate. And we can integrate not just with data stores, but also with other tools. Another really key one is because it's such a private space, let's say you had a sign-in sheet from your gala and someone needs to do the data entry. That's my least favorite thing to do in the world. Like literally hand me the toilet brush, you take that one. I don't want to do that work. And so what you can do is you can essentially upload a photo of that sign-in sheet and say extract the data and create a table with first name, last name, email address, and phone number. And it will not only bring that in, but then if you wanted to append a column that says meeting location. So when you upload it into your CRM, it has that. You can append that meeting location. So we could say, Gala 2025. And then there's an export to CSV button. If you download that, you upload it to your CRM. And now you've done that work in like a tiny fraction of the time. And it does a good job even with bad handwriting. It's a very deep and robust tool. It truly is enterprise grade. So it's hard to kind of go through all of it, but that's a pretty good run through. I'm sure we'll come across other stuff along the way.
Oh, sure. No, Aram, that's great. You had me at bad handwriting because I've struggled to find an AI tool that can successfully take my chicken scratch and make it actionable. So, I mean, again, that plus all the other features you've identified really, I get the sense that you've done a lot of digging to really understand what is it like to be in the shoes of an impact-driven professional? Like, what are the common use cases they would have? Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the differentiators for us is that our dev team comes out of being nonprofit communicators themselves, which is exceedingly rare. Like that makes you a unicorn and we somehow have to. And so when we have to translate that application layer, like what are the use cases of our user? They've already been in that seat. So it's not a surprise when grant applications have particularities to them because we've dealt with grant applications, right?
Sure.
Like when it comes to reporting and compliance, like we've been there and done that. And being able to have your dev team like fluidly adapt to those kinds of needs is a big differentiator. The other one is that because we've been in that chair and we've also dealt with technology that isn't built of by and for nonprofits, we took a very community-centric approach from the beginning. So when we first launched, we had a set of beta testers who are all nonprofit professionals who would try to get as wide of an array, like people doing all kinds of different stuff, different departments, different regions, different issue areas, to see who could break it the fastest so that we could learn and make the tool as robust as it could be for them. And that's been extremely successful for us. And we get most of our innovation comes from our clients asking, hey, this isn't really working for me. Could you do it this way? Or, hey, I've got this idea. I think if we connected blah, blah, blah to change agent, we could make magical things happen. So one of our clients is a major union, the second largest union in the country. And one of our partners over there went on a business trip and had to do expenses. And they actually generated a model, because we allow you, our enterprise clients, to create additional models. They made a model just for expense reporting. So that big, long, ugly policy that you don't want to spend time parsing, you can just basically load in your different expenses and it will tell you like how to handle those different expenses, like what approvals are required, what you need to make sure to include, all of that. They now have a model just for expense reporting. I never would have thought of that, but our partner did. And so that's how we like to innovate.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. That's a really great approach. It's fantastic that you have that talent in-house and that you're really listening all the time to your clients and partners to improve the system and make it more functional for them. You mentioned the fact that you were born out of a civil rights nonprofit. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, at a systems level, what challenges or problems are you looking to solve in tech, the social sector? Like, how does your origin story inform that mission?
Yeah, so because we've been in the space for a while, we're already working otherwise. And so Craig Johnson, who's our CTO and president, was on a call with a colleague at the Center for Community Change, actually at Community Change Action, which is their C4. And Christy said to Craig, hey, this generative AI stuff seems like it's going to be a really big deal. Could you do that, but for us? And for us, meaning a nonprofit, a civil rights organization, and someone with a social justice orientation. And so we set about building just that. And it turned out that Craig and the team were truly outstanding at it. And this was way back in the prehistoric times of AI, well, of generative AI, at least back in 2023. Yeah. And we started building, and it went so well that we commercialized the solution in July of 2024. And now we've got some, wonderful outstanding clients and are growing really quickly.
That's awesome.
Very, very excited.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I mean, you talked about sort of the prehistory back in 2023. We're recording this in late October 25. What trends should nonprofits or other social impact leaders be paying attention to in AI, let's say in the next 12 to 18 months? Because I think we've all seen it's really hard to make predictions much further than that because things are changing and improving so quickly. But what are some maybe 2 or 3 trends you would call out for these leaders to be watching in the AI space?
Yeah. So the first one is the technology is plateauing. It's not at the end of its growth curve, but the current and transformer-based technology of large language models, which if you don't understand that gobbledygook, don't worry about it. Basically, the generative AI that you're using regularly today is not getting that much better anymore. The difference between 2023 generative AI and 2025 AI was orders of magnitude, just like incredible growth, hard to keep up with. Like, oh my God, I can't believe it's getting that much better that fast. I think 25 to 27 is going to be much more incremental. And so it's a good time to get into using generative AI if you haven't made the jump yet. Or if you want to expand your use of AI, it's a good moment to do that because that kind of stability will help you really get great results. And so a lot of the focus, and you'll see this with all the mainstream companies as well, is more on how do I integrate this into my particular use cases, right? How do I make this part of my workflows? How do I integrate my tools? How do I integrate my documents? How do I increase my sophistication with a tool that's going to be more or less static, as opposed to how am I keeping up with this wildly changing technology? So that's the first trend I would say, is shifting from the deep tech getting way better to the kind of integration side of it becoming the real focus. Like, how do we harness this wild animal that we call generative AI? 2, I think that this implicates values even more. I mean, you're talking to someone who has been values driven before change agent AI and will be in forever. Like, it's just part of my DNA and my upbringing. But I think it's going to matter more and more because when you start integrating your tools, you start integrating your data, the privacy concerns that people have about AI become much more relevant. I want to be able to put personally identifiable information into my LLM, and you should too. It's important to be able to do that for all kinds of reasons. You might want to just personalize thank you notes to donors. You may want to personalize program offerings for constituents of your nonprofit that you're serving, right? There's lots of good reasons to put PII into a platform. But if you can't trust that that platform is going to protect your data, it's a big problem. Google just settled a big lawsuit for exposing child location data. If I expose child location data as a person, you wouldn't want to be on a podcast with me. Like, you should, like, there's some real issues with big tech, and they've got a long history of mining your data to sell things to you. And I think that it's important to make sure that you feel really comfortable with the privacy of where things are going, particularly as you go deeper. When you just sort of prompt and maybe load in a document that's public anyway, it doesn't really matter, let's be honest. But when you go deeper, it does. So I think that's a big one. I also think for nonprofits, so many of us are who've worked in the nonprofit world made that choice. And it wasn't because we were planning to get rich quick. We're doing it because sure, we all need money to survive, but I also want to have impact. And when people are concerned about harm, they don't want to use tools. So if you're concerned that data centers are harming marginalized communities, polluting the air, exacerbating climate change, that's a big problem. So you should make choices about which platforms you're more willing to work with so that your technology usage and your values aren't at odds. I think there's been a lot of cognitive dissonance for people around this, like, well, we have to use it, but we're at an intervention to say, like, we can do it the right way. And there's also a difference if you want to use the mainstream models, there's a difference between Google, which has been getting progressively worse on climate change, and say Meta or Apple, which have actually been really good. Like, I've got other critiques of those companies, but on climate, they've done a really good job of trying to move towards renewables. And, they use carbon offsets, which aren't perfect, but at least it's something. So, and like XAI or OpenAI have really not been good on those. And you can look at, I think it's called Climate Trace. It's a guy named Gavin McCormick, which speaks to that's where I'm drawing my information from that on. So 2 would be kind of values alignment. And the third one is I think people are getting much more sophisticated on the application layer. And what I mean by that is, how do you actually take this technology and put it to great use? So like, you don't need to be enamored with the technology. Like, I don't admire my hammer lovingly or, well, I will say I do have a hand drill from Hilti. That's
Okay.
incredible.
It's an
Like it can
exception, right?
it can drill at a 90-degree angle, or it has like an attachment to get like right at the top of a cabinet, for
Oh,
example.
that's cool.
I admire that one. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. But for the most part, there's no good reason to just admire your tools, right? It's really about what they do for you. And I think that that's where people are starting to get to with AI. It's like, okay, I don't really care that I'm using AI to write grant applications quicker, but I really care that I'm saving time writing grant applications. And that sophistication is really exciting for us because we get to work with people who kind of get it. They're like, okay, I'm going to apply AI to this and it's going to save me time, or it's going to give me a new capability I didn't have before. And it's really exciting that sophistication is starting to spread in the nonprofit world, because that's how we have better methodologies to share with each other so that we can, frankly, do more good. And it's a joy to do this in the social sector because we really do love to collaborate with each other. And like, I'm not going to not share my great methodology for writing fundraising emails with you because only I want to have that. Like, people are really excited to share.
That's awesome. I love the idea that the technology is stabilizing in some way. So it's a great time to get in the door if you're not already using it, and increase, get your comfort level, get your team up to speed. The reduction in the cognitive dissonance, like the progress that's being made, as you mentioned, environmental and other issues that maybe make the technology more accessible for those who have very legitimate concerns, and the evolution of applications and the ability to share. I think that's so powerful. Thank you for walking us through those trends, Aram.
Yeah.
The next question I wanted to ask you is capabilities in AI. You mentioned sort of this plateau that we're hitting. We hear a lot about AGI, superintelligence, all these kinds of things, but taking it down to earth for the social impact nonprofit community, what specific capabilities do we not have today that you're particularly excited about that could actually be very beneficial for nonprofits?
Good question. So I think that AGI, superintelligence, that whole concept is hype. I think it's marketing. I think the idea that you're going to train a technology on what we've already developed and that's going to make us smarter seems highly unlikely. You need some sort of creative input or emergent capability for that to happen. And I don't know how you can have that emergent capability from yesterday's news. So I'm not bullish on the whole AGI. The robots are going to learn and be smarter than us unless there's a fundamental shift in the technology. So for the Uber geeks out there, check out like neurosymbolic AI, which is, I think, much more promising for pushing into the future. I'd particularly point at an organization like ALOE, Inc., who's doing some really amazing sort of pairing of neurosymbolic AI concepts with OLMs. They've set a state-of-the-art benchmark on like multi-step task completion, which is pretty cool stuff.
Awesome.
But let's bring it back out of deep geekdom for a second. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the things that I'm most excited about, and it's things that we're working on, are like creating more collaborative space in our AI platforms. That to me is a really exciting thing. So I've studied decentralized networks and the emergent properties of networks and for 20-something years now. And last year kind of woke up to the fact that we had a technology that was really great at that. And so let me explain. So like I was saying before, the social sector likes to collaborate. So we have all these structures that are collaborative. We've got foundations that have capacity building programs for their grantees. We've got chaptered organizations where there's the national and then the chapters or the affiliates. We have coalitions where like-minded organizations that maybe are a little bit different, but share values and a mission can work together. We have, God, I'm blanking on one of the big ones. But anyway, there are all these structures. And if you get everyone on a shared instance within one of those structures, you're enabling the flow of information between people to happen at a far more accelerated pace. So usually coalition work is hampered by the need for meetings. The people have to talk to the people. We kind of have to do the people-y things like building relationships and feeling comfortable with each other. And it's fun. I enjoy it, but it also can be overwhelmingly tedious because, and then if you weren't there when the coalition formed, then you missed out on the getting to know you stuff, and it can be hard to come in late. There's things like that that are difficult. With AI, you can basically share what you want to share with the world, and they can decide to take it or leave it very rapidly. They don't even really need to have a conversation with you, although one conversation probably makes sense. So if let's say there's a drought in a given region, and you're in a coalition that's sort of focused on climate issues broadly, but there's a fire-focused one that is got some great information on how to make your home or community more fire resilient. You may not be the fire resilience nonprofit. You might be a community foundation, or you might be, whatever. But you want to share that information. If
Sure.
you're on a shared platform, you could take that fire resilience, let's say one pager, and then turn it into something that's more appropriate for your audience, drawing on that information, and create a highly tailored fire resilience document that you maybe wouldn't have known how to do without that other organization. So that kind of collaborative space, whether it's across a coalition, across an organization, across a team, I think that's going to be the most exciting next step. And it's another thing that you see across the AI tech space is how do we make it so multiple users can draw value the same way you might from a Salesforce. Like CRM technology is focused on this a lot. I think LLM technology is really going there now, and I can't wait to build out these new features for people.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea of making collaboration easier, more effective, and inclusive, because like you said, there are times when people have to swoop in or swoop out from a coalition or organization, or you want to get people assembled and on the same page quickly. And I think you're right. These tools have such great possibilities. So thank you for sharing that. What are some of the most common, 2 or 3 misconceptions that social impact leaders have about AI? And specifically, I'm thinking of those who maybe are, haven't spent time with the technology and are maybe skeptical. How do you respond to some of those key misconceptions, especially in organizations where there are other members of the team who say, like, I want to use this, but I also know if I raise that, maybe it's going to create conflict or create some skepticism?
It's really interesting that AI has been personified. Like people will say, I love AI or I hate AI. And it's not one thing, right? It really is a lot of different things. And even when we're talking about sort of one aspect of the technology, like the climate impact, AI isn't one way vis-a-vis the climate. There are ways to be climate friendly and there's ways to harm the climate. And it's really a choice by the people who are actually doing the things that make all this work. Those choices are what matter most. And so one of the things that I'm constantly trying to educate people on is like, yes, you should be really worried about data privacy with AI. Absolutely. There are also organizations like my own that are doing much better on that. There's greener options for AI and there's less green options. It's not one thing. It's not AI is bad for the planet, period. It's companies that are willing to harm the planet for profit that are going to exacerbate that climate impact. And so understanding that there's a difference, I think, is one of the biggest misconceptions on the kind of negative side. I think the other misconception that I often see is I love ChatGPT or I love Claude. And I think that their LLM, it behaves in this way and I like that. And I think that people underrate how much the models are being changed. So a good example of this is the sycophancy episode with ChatGPT, where I think it was around April. ChatGPT made some substantial shifts, probably to their system prompt and maybe some other elements of the model as well. And it started to basically agree with you a little too much. Like I think one of the examples I saw was, hey, I'm thinking about making a broken glass and nails cake for my birthday this weekend. What do you think? And it said something like, "Yeah, that's a brilliant idea. It's so innovative and creative. Your guests are going to love it," which, is not exactly what we want to be doing, right?
Big red flag, right?
Right. So these models are changing underneath all the time, and that has really big implications. So if you create something like a custom GPT, which is sort of it's like you put essentially a layer on top of the base model to perform a certain task or embody a certain perspective for you. If they're changing the underlying model all the time, your perfectly dialed in custom GPT today in a month or 3 months or 6 months isn't necessarily going to be so dialed in. So one of the things that we really try to do is offer people more stability. So I was talking to, there's SOCAP right now here in the Bay Area, which is an impact investing conference. And I ran into someone who works on research and measurement in the impact investing space. And they were saying, like, one of the things that's really tough is, I'm a measurement person, but if the tool underlying my measurement is changing, well, then I can't really measure it, can I? And that's exactly right. Like, imagine a ruler that was always 12 inches, but it was getting longer and shorter. You'd go, oh man,
Right.
This is like, maybe not giving me something that I actually want. This isn't great. So yeah. So I think that's another thing that people underrate. I think there's a kind of social impact executive who's getting a lot of value out of the AI, who underrates the effort it's going to take to onboard their team. We've had some experiences where, we tried to encourage people to get some training, which we provide, and we have partners who provide. And I think it's a really important thing to invest in because it's just a different mode of work. And it really takes some expertise to learn how to understand the technology, utilize it responsibly, get the kind of results out of it that are going to really advance your mission.
Yeah, those are great call outs. The fact that because we're personifying AI, we tend to put it into either the good box or the bad box, but there's actually a spectrum across a variety of factors, whether it's climate impact or, fill in the blank, to the fact that the system prompt, the underlying architecture is often changing without your knowledge. And consequently, to your point, Aram, that creates issues with maybe the validity or the reliability of the outputs that you're getting. So really being aware of that and also thinking about the power of training and onboarding and recognizing that you can't just give everyone a seat and then expect the outputs and the workflows just to suddenly magically improve. It really does take that change management, human to human interaction to really get good at that. Am I hearing you correctly?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like adopting any other technology in your organization or a new management approach, or change needs to be managed. And
Absolutely.
AI can be a relatively big shift. I think the best implementations of it shift tedium out, or shift tedium to AI, and shift strategy, relationship, all the other things that are uniquely human to the people. And I think it actually can lead to a very rewarding outcome. I've never liked filling out grant applications, but I really like having the money to be able to advance my nonprofit mission.
Yeah.
Or I don't really love writing thank you notes to donors, but I really love having calls where I get to deepen my relationship with them. It's that kind of shift that we can move away from the kind of work where we've got to do the technical work and towards the strategic and the relational.
Love that. Strategic, relational, outcomes oriented. Yeah, that totally resonates. I feel like you've done a great job articulating sort of the values that you and your colleagues bring to this work. So I wondered if maybe we could pivot to a question, which is like, what is something that people in this impact-driven space should be asking about AI, or maybe how they're using AI that too many people aren't asking enough?
Ooh, that's a good one. My favorite one right now.
Go for it.
Is the thing that people always assume is that the model is a choice, that it's like a menu, right? So I can choose from ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, and then maybe, since we all love change agents so much, I'm going to throw change agent into that list. And each one of them has its own behavioral characteristics, and those are set. That is not true. There are different ways that you can manipulate model behavior to better suit your needs. So one we talked about earlier, which is the sort of mini change agent custom GPT gem way of doing it, where you kind of add a system prompt and knowledge to a tool that sort of changes the behavior of your outputs. And so you could train a mini change agent to be your grant proposal generator or your social post generator. And you can load in past examples of excellence from your archive and have a long system prompt that describes what a good quality output should look like. What, it can include, you're the best grant writer in nonprofit history, and you're writing grants for Save the Octopi to preserve, octopus habitat, and so on and so forth. And then every time you go back to that tool and you just hit start chat, you've done all that pre-work so that it's set up for you to do well. That's one way to manipulate model behavior. But you can actually, if you have a partner like Change Agent, go a step above that and create a model that's like the root is trained, even potentially fine-tuned for a very specific purpose. The idea, let's give a good example. So let's say I could create a tool that's trained on 100,000 fundraising emails from around the world. And so it's learned all of this stuff about fundraising emails. The truth is that the climate action fundraising email from the group in Maine does very little for the criminal justice focused nonprofit in Las Vegas. Like the meaningfulness of those opening fundraising emails is very, very light. Maybe some format, a little bit of structure stuff, right? It's not really that deep. What actually is most valuable is your particular use cases, your experience. So if you're that climate group in Maine, the most important emails in the world are your 10 highest performing emails. That's what you should give to your LLM and build out either a model or a mini change agent that is specifically built for your fundraising emails. So one of the sort of the big lie that I'm getting at, it's not really a lie, but the sort of conceit that I'm getting at is that one size fits all generic models are preferable. And the truth is having custom built tools that are specific to your use cases are actually much more powerful.
That's fascinating. It's so practical. Like, look at your top performing emails. You mentioned earlier, like each of these impact leaders who's listening has a very deep subject matter expertise, relationships, very unique use cases that vary geographically, that vary topically. Yeah, that's really powerful. Thanks for sharing that. And also just knowing that's even a possibility, because I think a lot of people just feel like, I'm locked into this handful of options that everybody has access to.
Yeah. So, I mean, a good example is, that Unity client I mentioned before, they've built out a model just for their messaging development work and another one that's just for their expense reporting. You could do one that's just for communicating with your donors and one that's just for communicating with your community members or the people you serve. Because the way you speak to them may be very, very different. So have a model that's going to give you the outputs you want. And what that does is it raises the floor and the ceiling. So your most AI, adopting staffer is going to go, oh my God, it gets me so closer the first time and I know exactly how to work with it and it's going to give me great results. The Luddite who's like, do I really have to do this? Is it really going to be that helpful? Is going to have an experience where they go in and instead of having a garbage in, garbage out problem, which is what you get when you just sit someone who doesn't know what they're doing in front of a generic LLM, you're going to get something that actually aligns because it's been trained on your particular content for this particular purpose. And now they don't need to worry about, I don't know, it's like, it's almost like the difference between handing someone an Instant Pot and handing them a crock pot.
Yes.
The Instant Pot has all these buttons you got to press to figure out how to use it properly. It's like, am I pressure cooking? Am I slow cooking? Like, what's going on here? But if I just give you a crock pot, you're like, no, we're slow cooking today. Like, no. And you want to, when you're training people who are maybe tech averse or new to the technology, it's much better to give them a fairly narrow use case that's well designed for a particular purpose than if it is to give them something that has all the bells and whistles. It can be overwhelming.
Yeah, love that. I love the idea of like staging your education, your training process, leveraging those highly trained tools specific to your use case as a way to create more light bulb moments sooner and hopefully ease them into that process versus just dumping them in front of a generic tool and expecting them to excel immediately. It's a great insight. Sort of transitioning out of change agent a little bit just to you personally as a leader, Aram, I wonder what's something you do. This is a question we ask all of our guests. How do you stay sane with like the inevitable ups and downs of social impact work? What are things you do to really like keep you focused, keep you centered?
So my documentary filmmaking background involves me working on a lot of films about the Tibetans. And that means I had a lot of exposure to Tibetan Buddhism. And the concept from Buddhism of non-attachment is very helpful for me. So rather than being so tied to the outcome, I'm more tied to sort of like, am I doing what's available to me to be done in this moment? And having a sense of that being good enough. Like, when I do this job and I go to sleep at night, I feel like I'm doing the most, I'm contributing as much as I can and like manifesting the impact and values that I want to see in the world. And I can go to bed happy, even if I look outside and go, this isn't the way I want the world to be, because there's only so much I can do. And so I try to keep my expectations aligned with, the inherent limitations of what we each have as individuals. So I think that's probably fundamentally the most important in terms of staying sane in the times that I don't necessarily feel like the world outside isn't necessarily sane from my perspective. And so it's important that I keep my world right. Yes. And I've got, lovely friends and family and hold that near and dear and try to draw strength from that. But, between being in the social sector and having a startup, it can definitely be a wild ride at times. So I'm probably sounding very healthy and whole in how I'm presenting it, but there's definitely, I'm riding the roller coaster like everybody else.
Totally. No, I love that answer. I love that perspective from your time as a filmmaker, and the non-attachment concept, I think, is really a powerful one. Thank you for sharing that. You know, stories are a big deal as social impact leaders. Clearly, they're a big deal to you with your background in documentary film and now in tech. Is there a story that really shaped your trajectory? Like, I know you mentioned like some of your family's background. You've talked about your time in various points of your career. Was there a moment when it was like, this changes how I see the world? This changes like how I perceive the value of stories as actually making meaningful change? You know, something like that that really transformed the way you think and value the work that you do every day.
Yeah. I'll give you one that's a little closer to today, roughly.
Sure.
I have benefited tremendously from the Affordable Care Act as someone who was a freelancer, and also had the misfortune of having a pretty severe back injury when I was 17.
Oh, I'm sorry to
and
hear
led to a
that.
couple back surgeries. Yeah, I mean, it's actually worked out great, and I'm doing well, but I'm doing well in part because I got the healthcare I needed.
Sure.
And I, frankly, the financial impact of not having health insurance going through that would have been tremendous. And so when there was an attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act back in 2017, some friends and I basically started putting out like informational social media graphics out into the world that, let people know that, 1 out of 2 births in the country roughly are covered by Medicaid, and other sort of the impacts of what would happen if the Affordable Care Act was repealed. And we didn't really know who it was reaching and how it was being used, except occasionally people would write back and tell us, because you're just sort of blasting it onto the internet. We were doing individualized examples in different congressional districts around the country. But I was watching a news program one day, and I saw a graphic pop up for a town hall that an organization in New York, which is the other side of the country from me, it was up in Westchester, and that they were hosting, and they used our graphic. And I never would have known, except I happened to be watching the TV show that showed it. And, it's like a TV show with a screen grab of like their Facebook event or something. And it really, I've always believed in this idea of decentralized networks. But here I was, someone in the Bay Area who had this impact far, far away simply by having good intentions. And, sort of the butterfly flaps its wings, the butterfly effect question, just sort of coming to life. I find like a lot of purpose and joy in that, understanding that sometimes it may not feel like you're doing a lot, but the impacts can be felt much further and farther away than you could possibly realize.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that, and for your vulnerability about your injury and your personal passion and lived experience with having affordable healthcare insurance, and then the impact that has. Even something like that, being able to see that across the country is just really a powerful example of the power of networks, the power of good intentions, and people getting together, to your point earlier about collaboration, to really make a difference and keep people safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Aram, when people look back on your life and career, what do you hope they say about you?
Oh, man. I hope that as a person that I'm recognized as someone who led with their values and tried to care for people and do good in the world, and put a lot of effort and determination behind that to really make that change happen. Treated the people around him well, regardless, even the ones who maybe feel like they don't deserve it sometimes. I'm working on that. But
Yeah, me and you both.
Like I'm a really, generally kind and lovely person, but you can be behind that steering wheel. Just there's a monster in there. So we're working on it.
I love it. I love that.
Yeah, I think that's the main play. And I would love for the legacy of the work, particularly that we're doing with Change Agent, to be something that really helps a lot of nonprofits accelerate the change that they're making in the world. I mean, that is the joy of this work, is when someone comes to me and says, I can't believe how much time you freed up for us. We were able to do this. We got a housing measure passed in Albuquerque because you saved us so much time on this other thing that we could actually work on that too. Or we were able to serve more families because I was spending less time writing up a program brief or whatever. Like that kind of stuff gets me really excited to be part of a chain that's leading to more good happening in the world.
Amazing. I love that, Aram. Thanks for sharing. The last question, and this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm so grateful for the time you've invested and the expertise you've shared with our audience. Where can people go to follow you and find out more about Change Agent?
Yeah, so I am a social media averse person except for LinkedIn. So if you go to LinkedIn and look me up, I'm the only Aram Fischer that exists. I'm very easy to find. It's also linkedin.com/in/Aram Fischer. That's ARAMFISTHER. Thechange.ai is our website. So just thechange.ai. You can sign up for a free trial there. You can buy seats. You can also just connect with me at aram@thechange.ai and love a good email. And I would be excited to demo for anyone who's interested or connect around AI and impact, because that's where we live and what we do every day.
Awesome. Aram Fischer is CEO of Change Agent AI. Aram, thanks so much for your time today, and continued best wishes on this incredible platform and community you're building.
Thanks so much, Nate. I really appreciate the time.
Well, huge thanks to Aram Fischer for taking time to share with us the work that they're doing in AI, the opportunities for social impact leaders, the watch-outs to be aware of, and hopefully some things to look forward to in the future, right? I loved what Aram shared with regard to, look, nonprofits have teams in some cases, they have external partners. There's a need to share and collaborate in a way that today's systems and technologies often makes clunky or challenging or takes up a lot of time. And so I was really encouraged to hear about the possibilities to share, collaborate, and leverage these tools to really be beneficial and a net positive for clients across the world. So with that, thank you for listening. Thanks as always to Lee Williams, who does a tremendous job producing this show, for my marketing strategy partner, Audrey Anderson, who does a great job getting the word out and making sure people are able to get this content in the most accessible way possible. And thank you, the listener, for the work that you do. As I shared earlier, be sure to go check out that episode of the podcast. It aired roughly mid-October 2025. It's called Economic Uncertainty and Your Nonprofit: 5 Actions You Can Take No Matter What's Happening Around You. I hope you were encouraged today. I hope you have a great week. And until next time, I am Nate Burt, CEO of Silver Maple Strategies. Have a great one, and remember to lead like you live. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.